Good evening and welcome to the Susie L. McMahon Virtual Book Club. This is Monday, February 24th, and our featured author tonight is someone that I met in my hometown of Greenville, South Carolina, Rhonda McKnight. Rhonda, welcome.
Hello, and thank you so much. I tell you, I think about meeting you in Greenville and then doing a low country book club discussion and just love that, you can meet your readers and engage with people and find opportunities anywhere.
It was so much fun, so much fun. And so, just to give the full story on that, Rhonda was doing a book talk at the M. Judson Booksellers with Kay the Reader, and it was just so interesting and engaging, and what a great serendipitous way to meet. So, we're so glad to feature you tonight. So, Susie is watching from behind the scenes. So you should probably see her next month for the next featured author book talk. So let us get started with Rhonda McKnight. I will read your bio, and then I have a little blurb to read because there's a little side note to that too. So Rhonda McKnight is the author of 25 traditional and indie published award winning bestsellers, including An Inconvenient Friend, What Kind of Fool, and Unbreak My Heart. She is a two-time winner of the Emma Award in the categories of Inspirational Romance of the Year and Debut Author. She has been nominated thrice for the African American Literary Award. She writes inspirational book club fiction and Christian romance about complex characters in crisis. Her goal is to touch the heart of women through her stories using themes of faith, forgiveness, and hope. Originally from a small coastal town in New Jersey, she writes from the comfort of her South Carolina home. And the blurb that I'm going to read is by Denny S. Bryce. And Denny has been a former featured author in the Susie L. McMahon Virtual Book Club. So Denny says, a poignant story of sisterhood, motherhood, and new love found in old places. McKnight's writing is as delectable as the Gullah cuisine at the heart of the novel. And that was, again, Denny S. Bryce, best-selling author of The Other Princess and Wild Women and the Blues, which is the book that we read in Susie's book club. So with that, will you tell us a little bit about the backstory for Bitter and Sweet?
Wow. So Bitter and Sweet is the backstory has so many pieces. I moved from Atlanta 5 years ago, 2019. My son got married on, I think, May 18th, and on the 19th, I was loading up a truck and moving to South Carolina. It actually was supposed to be, I was so glad not to have to leave him alone in Atlanta, even though he was an adult. But my mother had been having some health issues, and I wanted to come for an extended visit, just to spend time with her. As a writer, I write from my laptop, so that was going to be an easy thing to do. And I ended up staying and getting caught by COVID. So when I got stuck with the pandemic, I decided to stay. My parents are older. I wanted to be here with them. And during that year, really couple of years, I sort of fell in love with South Carolina. I was gardening on our ancestral land. My dad had a garden. I had a garden. I had, just because we were shut in didn't mean I was shut in. I was driving all around the state, doing all kinds of, just sort of site visits, just trying to get to know the county better. I had traveled to South Carolina my whole life, every summer and sometimes in the winter, because both of my parents' families are from Clarendon County on both sides. And so this is where we spend our summer vacations and things. And so but I didn't know much about the county. I didn't know much about the area. And I started doing that research because I fell in love with the idea for another book, The Thing About Home, which was my first women's fiction novel that came out in May of 2023. And so after writing The Thing About Home, I was contracted to write another women's fiction novel, and I wanted to set it in the Low Country again. I had fallen in love with South Carolina, had no desire to go back to Atlanta, and really just enjoyed writing that novel so much and felt a connectedness to my family's history, the land, the history of South Carolina, which is so very rich and complex and just not known. And of course, there's the food, which I kind of grew up my whole life eating because, of course, my mother was Southern, so she cooked Southern food. But then, like being surrounded by the restaurants and visiting the Low Country and just loving everything about it, I knew that I wanted to write another book that was set in the Low Country. So I had these ideas sort of pinned to the wall. I have a corkboard that I use. And so I knew I was going to write another story that was set in the Low Country. And I knew that in this particular book, I wanted to highlight the Gullah a little more than I had in The Thing About Home. That was another thing I knew. But then there was also, being closer to my mom. My mother is 79 now. When I wrote this book, I guess she was 77. My mother's mother passed away in childbirth when my mother was 2 years old. And of course, I've known that my whole life because, of course, I grew up without a maternal grandmother. But I don't think that I understood fully how much of a heartbreak that continued to be for her and her siblings. Like when you're young, you don't think about things as seriously or as deeply sometimes as when you get older and you're sitting with a woman in her 70s and you have a conversation, you mention something and you realize this is still such a heartache. And I thought, it's time to write about this. It's time to write about it, Rhonda. You need to honor your maternal grandmother. I wanted to honor my mother. I wanted to honor her siblings. And I wanted to write a novel that sort of would just be like a legacy novel for my family. And so I pinned that on the wall. Like, I want to write about maternal, the after effects of maternal death. I think we hear stories on the news, or you may know someone who passes away in childbirth. And so then there's this man left with this baby, and like the worst possible situation. You never expect that like this is going to be his life. I'm sure he never thinks this is going to be his life. But do people really think about sort of the aftermath of it all? Because it's not just, you lose a mother, you bury a young mother, you have a dad here and people bring casseroles and look after him. But then, like, what happens next? And I wanted to write a story about that. And I certainly did not want to write my mother's story. I did not. But I wanted to really delve into that. And Bitter and Sweet gave me an opportunity to do that. I had already pinned on the wall that I wanted to write a sister story, a story about complicated sister relationships. I have a sister and she and I get along great, because I'm the oldest and, she does what I tell her to do. And so it all works out really well. But I thought, what if the sort of the riff, because I've met so many people traveling with this book, and when they hear there's a estranged sisters, for so many people there's this immediate click, like, oh, I have that, and my sister and I are suing each other over this, or so many little stories that draw people to this book. And so I thought, what if prior to that, though, I've experienced that, but prior to that, I thought, what if the rift between the sisters was something so huge and so hard to get over, and other adults in their lives had complicated it so that it was sort of like, cold down deep in the earth. Like, how do you unearth it? How do you clean it off? How do you turn it into a diamond? And so that was pinned on the wall, and that sort of all of that sort of birthed this story of the bitter and sweet. I forgot about my last pin. My last pin was that I also, and I'm sorry if I'm getting ahead of you here,
No, no, I'm just
but
enjoying visualizing
my
your
pin's on the
real
wall,
life
right?
vision board, right?
Yeah. And so I love writing stories about everyday women in history. We have so many amazing books that are coming out about women who've done wonderful things. You know, Victoria Christopher Mary's book, Harlem Rhapsody, just came out. Marie Benedict has a new book. We could go on and on about all the amazing books that are being published about women who have not had their stories told. And that's really exciting because I love historical fiction, and it's time, right? It's time for women
Yes.
to be told. But I also always kind of think about the everyday woman, the woman who's not famous, but she leaves a legacy. You know, she leaves a legacy in keeping her family alive, helping her family survive. A woman who, in the early 1900s, maybe during the Great Depression when things were really bad, she knew how to cook. She could make a meal out of nothing. She knew how to grow a vegetable. She knew how to make pies and sell them, enough to keep her family alive. She knew how to sew or quilt, things that people needed in the community. She knew how to do. And we know that, we're not going to take anything away from men who work hard and bring home the bacon and try to keep things together. But you know what? My experience has been, and this is me as a daddy's girl. My experience has been, despite the efforts of men, women hold it together. Okay.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
if there's any lack, he may not even know there's lack because she sold 3 pies over there that he didn't even know about, or she did a quilting or whatever. And sometimes there's money that a mom can tuck into a kid's pocket for baseball because of something she's done. And I love that because I've seen it
Yes.
over and over and over again.
Yes.
Um,
And just
really
I'll
wonderful.
interject there. If anyone has not read the novel yet, it is a dual timeline. So when we're talking about we're talking about many women in the story.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
just to make a footnote of that while
Yeah.
we're
Thank you. Thank you for that. And so I wanted to write Tabitha's story. I wanted to write a story about an everyday woman who knew how to survive, who was resilient enough to figure out how to make a way. Because I think that is the history of the women in my family. That's the history of the women in a lot of our families. And if no one writes about these women, 100 years from now, they'll disappear in literature. All the famous women will have books, but we need the stories of everyday women. And so that is always pinned on the wall. So that's kind of bitter and sweet it came from a variety of stories I wanted to tell that I felt I could collect and pour into one novel.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The backstory is always just so incredible. Just to learn about the nuances and the planning, and then the surprise things that happen along the way,
Yeah.
right? I'm looking in the comments. We've got folks coming from Colorado, from Texas. Welcome, welcome. So, would you like to read an excerpt and then we'll go on to some questions?
Sure. Yeah, I'd
Okay.
love to.
Thank you.
I went through and I thought, I always read the same excerpt, and there's a reason for that. And so there's no point in me looking around for anything else. Just read what you like, Rhonda. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the prologue. I think that it sets up the story, in my opinion, perfectly. It just sort of, Bitter and Sweet is the story of estranged sisters who receive a cryptic text message from their grandmother. They think that she is texting them because their grandfather, who has been ill, is perhaps iller. These two girls live in the upstate of South Carolina, and Grandma summons them to Georgetown. And so they come separately because they're estranged. And when they get there, they think that, like I said, they're going to be do something with their grandfather, but when they arrive, their grandmother challenges them to reopen the family restaurant that has been closed since the grandfather's illness. But these two women don't have a relationship. So there is a lot going on in that kitchen that has nothing to do with cooking. And a lot of heat. And the historical story, which is about 50% of the novel, is the story of their great great grandmother, a woman named Tabitha Cooper, Bitter for short, as she is navigating her life in Charleston, South Carolina, when she left home wrong and has to figure out a way to make a living and take care of her three children when the only thing she knows how to do is cook. And so, through 100-year-old letters that Tabitha has penned, Sabrina and Mariah in the present learn some lessons about their family history, some lessons about the resilience of a woman that they knew very little about, and also that a lot of the problems that they were dealing with in the current time are the same sort of issues that their great great grandmother dealt with, over 100 years ago. I always like to think of it as different day, same devil, for women. And so that's what the novel is about. So we open with the prologue, and the prologue is written in the point of view of their grandmother. Her name is Grandma Gail Cooper Holland, and it's present day in Georgetown, South Carolina. This is the only chapter in the book that is written in Grandma Gail's point of view. And but it was an important one to include, and so I'll go ahead and read it. My expectations were too high. That's what I'd been telling myself as I exited the hospital. It repeated in my mind as I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. The sun had been swallowed by the dark of dust by the time I parked behind the restaurant. I reached for my purse and stepped from the car. The keys jangled in my free hand as I walked to the back door. I inserted them, releasing the locks one at a time, and then pushed the noisy door open. Lingering citrus from the oil cleanser I'd used on the floor rose to my nostrils. I was impressed that the scent was still so strong. But it'd been a week since I'd mopped. Maybe it was always strong, but this place wasn't always so empty. Usually the tiny kitchen was in use. The smells of spices and coconut and sounds of searing meat and pots of seafood gumbo rolling to a boil always met me at the door. That is, unless I arrived before the cooking began. And that was rare. I was never here alone. I never considered I'd have to be here alone. I looked at the tables, their chairs atop them. The glass door to the bakery case glistened with a haunting emptiness. I stepped to my left and walked into the kitchen. It was small, much too small, I'd always thought, for all we'd done here. But today it felt huge, like it was swallowing the nothingness that had erected itself and rested in every corner. Nothing had been cooked here in weeks. Nothing had been served to the community who had depended on us for almost 90 years. We would reach 90. Forever was the goal, but we couldn't end at 87. It was too odd of a number. It came up short. 87 was unfinished. I walked to the wall across the room. I called it my wall of history because it included pictures all the way back to 1937 when my grandmother opened this place. There were pictures of every cook, every celebrity and politician who ever visited, our family and friends. This wall contained lifeblood. A lot was shed to open this place, and even more was shed to keep it open. My eyes roamed the many framed award certificates and settled on one in particular, a presentation from the mayor of Georgetown. I was proudest of this one. Etched in gold script, it read, Gail and Odell Holland for Restaurant of the Year. We had rivaled fancier establishments and shined. I reached into my purse for my phone and placed a call to my granddaughter, Mariah. Her voicemail encouraged me to leave a message. Coincidence? A reprieve? Maybe. I wasn't supposed to ask. I pushed that thought away. Ask I would, because it was the season for shocking statements and questions. I knew that well. 3 weeks ago, the doctor had let my husband's condition slip from his mouth as easily as raw oysters slip from the shell. Your husband has had a massive stroke. He will need full-time care. A skilled nursing facility is your best option. The doctor's report stabbed me, wounded me in a way I was wholly unprepared for and destroyed by. And then Odell's words, Gail, keep Una promise. A tear slid over my cheek as I fell back against the wall. I was tired. My 69-year-old body was exhausted. It was time for the younger ones to relieve us in the same way I relieved my mother. I went to my contacts again. This time I called my other granddaughter, Sabrina. I got her voicemail too. She didn't listen to voicemail. None of these young people did. So I sent a text to both of them with a simple message. I need you to come home.
Ooh, thank you for that reading. There is so much in that prologue.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite part is when she goes to the wall to just reflect on everything and to know that there's still more. Oh, and Susie says on the screen, I'm getting hungry. Oh, that was amazing. While you were reading, there it is, a technique question came in from Karen D. Do you write in a linear method or piece it together later?
Oh, I love this question because people are always surprised when people never ask me this question, but when I talk about my writing process and share it, they're always surprised. I do not write linear. I typically write the first chapter of a book, and then I write the last chapter of the book, and then I write whatever part I want to write next. I usually do not write the second and third chapters until I'm much further into the book. I am the most nonlinear writer ever. It actually drives me crazy because I do get to a point where it's like it's time to put this novel together. But what I write to a very detailed outline. The book changes tremendously from the outline, but I do write to a very detailed outline, and that allows me to pick and choose what I want to write. I write based on my mood sometimes. If I've written 29 books, and 25 of them are romances. And so sometimes I want to write a romantic part. Like that comes easier for me. And so if I want to write the couple having a fight or stress, if I'm in a bad mood and I want to write a fight scene, I want to take it out on somebody, I take it out in the book. And so I can choose what I want to write based on kind of my mood. It works for me. It's not always great. It's kind of funny. I kind of liken it to a child, sitting in front of a dinner plate. And you know how kids do, they'll eat the meat and they'll eat their potatoes and they save those peas and carrots for last. Because children are they hope against all hope that those vegetables will disappear. I always say that. Right. And so they save those peas and carrots for last. And so I kind of do that. And then I'm like a kid. I get to the end and all I've got are peas and carrots, the parts of the book that I didn't necessarily want to write. But the good news is that by the time I've written so much of the novel, when I get to sometimes those more difficult parts, I know those characters so well. I know the story so well. And so it makes it a little easier to kind of plow through things that I kind of push to the side.
Great. So thanks, Karen, for that question. And we have another question from Rebecca Bruff, who is part of the Susie L. McMahon Virtual Book Club and former featured author panel. So Becky is asking, what's the most challenging aspect for you? Does creativity come easily?
Wow, creativity comes really easy for me. I am an idea machine. I think I come up with a new idea every week. There are times when I come up with ideas that could become something on a daily basis. I think the most challenging part for me of any of this is once the book is out. Honestly, it's marketing. Reaching new readers. When I started my career as a traditionally published author with Kensington. I published, I think I had 3.5 relationship fiction. They were inspirational, kind of heavy stories about couples in crisis and how they navigated those things through faith. And so the imprint that I was writing for dissolved. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm done with this writing thing. It was kind of fun. I went on a couple of vacations. No big deal. I'm over it. And so I had a friend say, oh, you absolutely cannot stop writing. You got to write something else. So she said, why don't you write something fun? Why don't you write something that you like to read? And I was a huge romance reader. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll write a romance. So I wrote a romance novella, literally as part of a Facebook challenge in 14 days. The title was Breaking All the Rules. And I was nervous to get it edited and published because I've never self-published, but everyone was self-publishing. And in 2013, I think there was just this boom of authors who had found their space to be able to publish, which was awesome. And so I thought, I don't know if my readers want this from me. Like, I had not been writing romance, but I decided to publish it. My beta readers kept telling me they thought it was really good. And I always say that was a story that saved my writing career because it just sold and sold and sold and sold. And I mean, literally just stopped selling. Like, it just really did well. And I thought, I like this every month money that was happening from being an indie author. And so then I continued to write romances. I wrote another, I don't know, like 23 or 24. And so I love that, being independent. When it came time for my novel, The Thing About Home, I knew that I wanted that book to have a larger audience. It was an important story for me. Not that the others weren't, but I wanted it to have a larger audience. And so I came back into traditional publishing. I think I probably lost the question, but I hope I answered the question in this long trail of words that I've used to respond.
No, I think that definitely answered the question. And I love that you have had all these experiences with
Mm.
publishing. So, and continue to write, which we are so, so grateful for. Let's see. Another question has come in from Shoshana. Did Rhonda consider revealing more letters from Tabitha? She loved that part.
Bitter and Sweet is a really big book. So the answer to that question, from an editorial standpoint, and certainly from my publisher standpoint, is we need you to write smaller books, ma'am. I am 10,000 words over my word count on both my books. And so the answer to that is there were things that hit the cutting room floor. I hoped that readers would, in writing the story in dual timeline, and rather than just including, sort of just letters, as a flat entry in the book, I hoped that readers would enjoy meeting Tabitha, enjoy the journey with her enough that they would feel like they had learned enough about her and experienced her life and her choices and her challenges enough to be satisfied with how much of the story they got of her. I have had many people tell me that Tabitha should have had her own book. Like, why didn't you just write a book about Tabitha Cooper? Because they fell in love with her so much. But she was really only supposed to be about 20% of the book, and she just kept talking. She said, I've got more story. I've just got more story. And I just saw her walking with that wagon, through Charleston. And I thought, well, I'm going to tell as much of it as I'm permitted to. So the answer to the question is yes, but I feel like, based on the feedback that I've gotten from many readers, I think sometimes when people say, I want it more, I've learned that it doesn't always mean they didn't have what they needed. It just means I loved it so much that I wish that I could have stayed in this space longer. I know that I experienced that with books that I read too. So
Yes, I think that's ideally it. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Maybe you could do blogs or something with them. So I don't know, a word from Tabitha, right? But she was such an impactful character in the story for sure. Thanks, Shoshana. And Rebecca Bruff is coming up with another question. How long does it usually take you to go from idea to finished manuscript? And that was kind of one of my questions too. Like, how long
Okay.
did you work on the book? Yeah.
Bitter and Sweet, and I didn't take long. I started working on this novel. I outlined, it usually takes me a good month to outline a book. So I outlined this book the summer before I started writing it, because you send it to your publisher, they approve it and say, yeah, we're a go for this. And then I started writing it in January of 2023. And I finished the first draft by the end of March. Now, so that's 90 days, which is pretty fast for a 100,000 word novel. I am a fast writer. I think a lot of the story just poured out of me. And I was anxious to I think I wrote probably harder than I normally would because I started a little late and I needed to finish because my dog was leaving me. And I did not want this book to be on my finishing this book to be on my to-do list when I knew that he was going to pass. And so I just worked really hard, I think, sort of plowing through my own upcoming grief to get it done. So really, I'd say about 90 days for this particular book. The thing about Home probably took much longer. It was probably a good 6 months, which I know may still sound like, wow, that's really fast too. Um, but yeah, I'm a pretty fast writer when I am in love with a story. And I work all the time when I'm writing. Like, so I write, sometimes I have 12-hour days. So I'm getting a little older and I'm trying to get away from doing that because it's not always great to have 12-hour writing days. It's not physically a good thing. So with my next novel, I plan not to do that. But yeah, it took about 90 days from from that prologue to the end.
Wow, that's phenomenal. Fantastic writing. Oh my goodness. So, we are actually over our
Are
time just a
we?
little bit, but hey, I have one more question, and
Okay.
I think everybody's going to stay on for the answer to this one. So, let's talk about the food just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. The food is my favorite research. So, I love Southern food. I love low country food. I love Gullah food. And so what I do is I've always eaten Southern food. But when it comes to when I do my research, because no matter what is, even though I'm familiar with the areas that I'm visiting at this point for my writing, I still travel. I go. Um, I like to look at the ocean. I like to travel the streets that I'm writing. You know, went through Charleston and just sort of imagined the locations where this would be and where this would have been 100 years ago and what it might have looked like. And so I do a lot of that, getting in spaces and sort of trying to connect with the energy of what was there. And try to envision what was there. And a part of that is going to a restaurant while I'm in Charleston or Georgetown or whatever and getting something to eat. So the food is just, I think the food is very much a part of Gullah culture. It's a part of the Low Country. When people think about South Carolina, I think people think about food. And so for me, in writing about the food, in addition to it being sort of accurate in terms of what you would expect to find in a book set in that setting, I think there's also sort of a nostalgia and a familiarity with the food that readers enjoy. Kind of gives a sense of comfort. Like you remember that what a good macaroni and cheese tastes like in your belly. And so I write with nostalgia in mind. I think that that is a way to emotionally connect readers to a story. And so comfort foods is kind of one of those things. I have a lot of readers who remember cooking in the kitchen with grandma, baking a pie, learning how to make their first cobbler, um, things like that. And I think that when I write that, I'm writing from the heart of what I know, but I'm also, I think, connecting what I know and what I've experienced to the experiences of the people who are like me,
Hmm.
folks who love South Carolina and love
Yes.
what we have to offer here.
Yes. Yeah. All those special connections through food and eating together, cooking together. Yes, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yay. Well, thank you so, so much for being here tonight as the featured author for the Susie L. McMahon Virtual Book Club. I hope that you'll come back again. And real quick, before we sign off, what's your current read?
What's my current read? I am currently reading a YA book. It's the second book in the Davenport series by, what's the author's name? Crystal Marquise.
Ah,
Um, and so I'm reading the second book in the Davenport series. And right behind that is Harlem Rhapsody by Victor Andrews
okay.
Murray. I can't wait to get into that one. So both of them are historical fiction novels, and set in the same time period that, Tabitha walked. I think I've fallen in love with that period of time. There's so much that was discovered, the Harlem Renaissance, and there's so much unique history there, the establishment of our military, and um, just a lot. And I've
Yes.
enjoyed reading books that sort of touch on all those things.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Again, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And, come into the group whenever you have, good news to
Will
share,
do.
exciting things to share, please do. And I will let you say good night, and then I'll do just a little bit of book club business and then sign off myself. So thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really a great interview. It was good to see you again. I look
Good
forward
to
to
see you.
seeing you again when I come back to Greenville. And
Yes.
to readers, I hope that 2025 is a year that brings you puts you in touch with a lot of really great books. So.
Thank you. Okay, Susie L. McMahon Virtual Book Club readers, thanks for being here tonight or for listening later. I think I could have listened to Rhonda go on more about Bitter and Sweet. It was a really magical read for me. I love historical fiction too. But a book club business up next, beach music discussion with Jonathan Haupt, the executive director from the Pat Conroy Literary Center. That will be March 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So again, thank you for being here live. Thank you for all of your great questions. Thank you, Susie, for the opportunity to be in the host seat tonight. And we'll see you next time.